As the nation woke up this morning, not to the images of burnt-out buildings, but largely peaceful protest-ish. Has Starmer passed his first big test? I'm joined now by GB News' political editor, Christopher Home. Christopher, has he passed his test?
A good question. I mean, the answer to that is we don't know yet because he is chairing a meeting of the Cobra group tonight, all these key people around him in that Cabinet Office briefing room tonight. We know there are as many as 20 potential gatherings today, Thursday, 3 counter-protests. There's not as many as were planned for last night that didn't happen in the end. We've heard from Sir Keir Starmer saying, well, he wants to reflect on last night, and he called last night better than expected, because there had been 160 planned last night, only 36 took place, and the National Police Chiefs Council is very pleased. The question is what comes next. I mean, I would look at this and go, well, we're nowhere near the numbers in 2011, 3,000 arrests then, 2,000 facing criminal charges. So with only 500 arrests, this is only barely a sixth of as bad as it was in 2011, judged on arrests. He was asked early today, Sir Keir Starmer, will he now, if this is past the worst, and we hope so, will this mean that you will go to the causes of what's going on here? We know about the concerns about immigration from our mailbox at GB News, and is that part of it? And here's what we have to say.
If we have indeed turned a corner and seen an end to the violence, is now the time to engage with the underlying tensions that are in communities over the issue of immigration?
The first priority is safety and security of our communities. And yes, last night was much better than was expected, but we are not going to give up on our efforts here. That's why it's very important that I continue my discussions, coordinating with law enforcement, with police leaders, to make sure we've got the right officers in the right place, to keep pushing on the criminal justice response. I was very keen that we're able to demonstrate that if you're involved in disorder, within days you'll be in the criminal justice system, and some people starting long terms of imprisonment. That needs to continue, and so that is my sole focus.
So the sole focus of the Prime Minister is cracking down on and ensuring that these individuals are processed, jailed if required. He's really going into his DPP's comfort blanket. He knows about law and order. He can do prosecutions. He knows how the system works. He knows how to make it work. He knows how to put a rocket up prosecutors to get going on this and demonstrate the problem here with getting people through the system and demonstrating that the government is, or the police and law enforcement are cracking down hard on those who riot. The wider question, which is harder, and he is not addressing it yet, is why are people rioting? Is it all the far right, to use their term? Is it people concerned about immigration? Is it just people worried about what's happening here? They don't see a firm policy on immigration. They've junked the Rwanda plan. We know that from the Tory party. What's next? What will you do about that? We still have migrants in hotels. That's, I would argue, a failed Tory policy, which just gets people's backs up in communities. What will you do about this? And there's no attempt so far to reach out on the causes. Fair enough, we're a day after the threat of rioting passed, but at some point soon, the PM has got to address the underlying causes here.
Well, also, I mean, if he's calling those protests peaceful, passive-aggressive chants and the Free Palestine, that whole thing again, Jewish people do not feel safe coming out in the streets. If a lot of the protests were that, why is he not sort of addressing that as well? Because that, to me, if I were Jewish, would be passive-aggressive and I wouldn't be coming out.
We heard from Charlie Peters there describing how those remarks by that councillor were not at all peaceful, cutting throats. That individual has been suspended by Labour. Labour say that this behaviour is completely unacceptable and it will not be tolerated. This councillor has been suspended from the party. But yeah, I mean...
What about the wider protest,
well,
though?
You've got to be so carefully. You can't be seen to be taking the side of one group, not the other. Of course, everyone's against violence and thuggery. Of course, everyone's against that. But equally, there is concern about migration, and that's not been looked at so far.
And what about the issue that it almost is silencing people who want to protest about immigration? Because if I wanted to protest about immigration, I wouldn't dare show up just in case it was hijacked maybe by the far right, and I could be embroiled in it.
No one wants that.
So all of this has silenced the voices of people who want to express their concern about immigration. So how's he going to deal with that?
Well, I don't know yet. He hasn't talked about it yet. And you'd argue Angela Rayner, she's the community secretary, perhaps she should be out there saying, here's what we should do and try and meet people concerned, meet not the rioters, they're in prison, they're being dealt with, but meet other people concerned about immigration and showing a degree of understanding that they are governing this country for everybody and not trying to just put people who are concerned about immigration and call them all far right.
Yeah.
And that's not the right answer.
Because that's the whole point, isn't it? There are people there that want to represent their views on immigration, and if it is hijacked by extreme elements, then how do you separate yourself from that? And that is a big issue, and I don't know how he's going to solve it. And I'd like to hear more from him about.
Well, we're
Keir
trying
Starmer.
daily to get him on.
So he's still not spoken
And his
to
team.
has
No,
he?
well, we have had a minister today from the policing minister. Well, more coming over the next few days. We are trying to get the government to explain this and answer our questions. And we had last night Nick Thomas-Simmons on the Jacob Rees-Mogg program at 8 p.m. and we interviewed him there for the channel.
Well, that's a start. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope. Right, well, I'm joined now by Norman Brennan, who's the director of the Law and Order Foundation. Norman, thank you very much for joining me. Well, do you feel this is a sort of victory for Keir Starmer? Has he shown his mettle and stopped what could have been a potentially riotous night?
I wouldn't call it a victory. It appears that the police and the establishment took it hook, line and sinker yesterday from hoax information. Bots within social media stated there were going to be 100 separate demonstrations. And rightly, the police put into action a very good plan, and that was to flood the streets with police officers. The 6,000 stand-in soldier officers that Keir Starmer talks about aren't new. They're actually being taken away from forces, divisions in the streets that are already being depleted. I think what's going to happen is that Keir Starmer's got to actually wake up and look at the elephant in the room that he seems to be missing, and that is undocumented, and it's also unmitigated mass migration. Now, all of these offenders, or most of these rioters, are taken to the streets, and they're doing it in the wrong way. Once the dust of battle and war has subdued, there's tens of millions of us, the adults, that have got questions that we want answering from. So in answer to your question, Keir Starmer has got to wake up and smell the coffee, because at the moment he seems to be swerving the elephant in the room.
And since he's obviously been in power, 4,000 have come here illegally, and we haven't really heard any proper policies as to how he's going to tackle that, which is quite distressing, really, for a lot of people, because they won't know how to express their views. Now, let's come back to the misinformation or the hoax information. There was a lot of talk about hoax information, which led to a lot of the violence, which some people have attributed why the motivations for others who decided to be violent over the last few days. Are they going to explain where they found their information or their sources, or why they went along with this?
Well, Nana, let me tell you this. The riots throughout Britain were on the back of a lie. I saw exactly what happened within the hour. It was posted to me. I'm quite high profile on social media, and I saw what was posted to me. It was a young lad, somebody, a bode or some sort of bot person on social media, selected a name that was connected to a Muslim. He then knew that name is connected to those that may well have entered Britain illegally, and he also stated that he was under the watch of MI6. Well, in fact, it would have been MI5. I then saw another message that highlighted the true name. But by the time I actually looked at social media, see what was going on, hundreds of thousands, and in fact 4 million clicked on that false, misleading information, and some very high-profile people, Nana, without checking any of that information, retweeted it. And as a result of a lie, we have had national riots, hundreds of police officers assaulted, millions of pounds worth of damage, and the whole country living in some sort of fear on the back of a lie. And we have got to be very careful. And the caveat to all of this, Nana, when we're talking about police in Britain, I'll tell you what we need to do. I've been in policing and law and order 45 years. The government, the government under Keir Starmer, has said they want 13,000 more officers. Well, 2,000 of those officers must be selected into 8 lots of 250 officers, every single one public order trained. 10 dog handlers on every single one of those units. And what we also need is 10 firearms officers. All of those 8 units will be spread throughout Britain. One will be in London. We need water cannons with with smart water dye and facial recognition. And what we do, all of these demonstrators in their hundreds and thousands think that they can throw rocks, assault police, and cause huge amounts of criminal damage, will be sprayed with that smart dye. And as they go home, they're nicked, identified from the photographs and aerial views that we have got, and put before the courts. Do you know what, Nana? If we had 8 of those groups that, where necessary, could join together, 250 at a time, we will take the streets back from the criminal element. But do you know what? Keir Starmer seems to be like that guy, the naked guy on the horse. He doesn't think that everybody sees him for who he is. And after 4 weeks, I've never known a new Prime Minister to have so much on his plate within 4 weeks. And when he was in opposition, Nana, he had all the answers, all the solutions.
Well, he would argue that a lot of this has been, started well before he even took office. And, of course, the Tory party have been in power for, 14 years beforehand. So a lot of it could be put towards, put squarely at the feet of the Tory party. But, yes, you can't shift the blame when you're in office. You have to take the rough with the smooth, and that is how it goes. And also, to your comment with regard to police officers, I mean, who would want to be a police officer these days? Given a lot of the things that have happened and the lack of support it appears that many of them receive if they are embroiled in incidents. Who would want to do it?
I know, you're absolutely right. Only an hour ago, we've been told a second Greater Manchester police officer is under investigation. I don't want to go through the evidence, but what I will say is that what happens so often now, Nana, is that the police are involved daily with often ugly-looking arrests that, if taken out of context, the public would say, how outrageous. But when you're actually given other evidence, the surrounded evidence, what happened before, it's amazing what can happen. But in relation to joining the police, I'll be quite honest with you, I love the job. It was in my blood. I'm still one of their lead independent advisors and spokesperson. Would I recommend anybody to join the British Police Service today? If it's your passion, do it. If it's not, don't bother. But even if you do, go speak to serving officers and find out it's not like all that's said in the glossy brochures.
Well, I think that would probably apply to most jobs, for sure. If it's not your passion, I'd warn you not to do it. Norman Brennan, thank you very much. He's the director of the Law and Order Foundation. Right.